This is a picture, a very high-level cartoon of what the solution looks like. As originally designed, an OEM would be sitting at their facility behind their VPN firewall, would go through this secure internet connection to our fab environment, go through our DMZ zone, our dual firewall zone, where the eCenter servers reside and all the controls are in place, and then finally pass through that other firewall and get access to the equipment on the factory floor. And one note, as things have changed over the years, as this has continued to evolve in terms of its capability and popularity, what you see is the OEM users might actually be physically inside our factory, walking around with their own laptop on our wireless system, but going back through their own infrastructure and back into the fab. Seems a little circuitous to get back there, but it is a secure way to do that, and that's one of the things that we've had them do while they're there inside our facility. Key elements of this solution: security and collaboration. As I mentioned, the security aspects of this are always changing, and this solution provides ability for us to put in place the proper authorization, authentication, as people try to come into the system, and we do appropriate filtering and auditing and version control, and the data, of course, is encrypted as it traverses the environment. And this is important to us. As I mentioned, we have partners in our factory, so we have IBM-only data, we have data that's available to IBM, and certain partners who bought into a certain technology, and partners who bought into other technologies. You can't let those mix, as well as you don't want one vendor of a tool type going into somebody else's tool either, because you have IP there that people would like to protect as well. And the solution also provides this global collaboration capability where you might bring in a field service engineer, an application engineer, process or equipment engineer from the ICM or the OEM or one of our partners, and you'd be able to provide these collaboration tools that go along with that, including real-time chatting and then, of course, the sharing of files and the desktop. And we would manage the authentication across all those. So this is a little wordy, but I just wanted to show you some of the changes about what we put in place today versus how the Semitech guidelines were first set up. So authorized personnel includes equipment suppliers, as originally stated, but also our own internal engineers. This team has grown considerably in terms of their use of our eCenter product, our SecureWise product, as well as our partners. And you notice you also get access not only to the tools, but the facilities, support equipment, and support servers within the environment. So we manage that as well. And it's not only just to repair the equipment, but really also the big value is coming in and exchanging data and also process improvements. This is just a list of some of the features that you would see in this particular solution. Everything from the file transfer to the real-time operations to remote viewing of the tool screen without being able to affect anything, to some programmed automatic file transfer type solutions. So many different capabilities are available within the solution, which we see is growing over time in terms of remote access and control of our equipment. Just to give you an idea about the coverage across the factory, we're probably covering about a dozen tool suppliers at this point in time, maybe 40 different tool types, a couple hundred tools are connected, and hundreds of clients or hundreds of people have eCenter user IDs. The equipment suppliers, IBMers, partners, and our support staff as well. So how is the system being used? Well, the OEM, some of them are looking at it for just basic remote tool support as originally designed. Others are really focusing on improving tool OEE, overall equipment efficiency, for tool uptime and process yield. Others are seeing this as a pathway in for the first time to get access to data in the factory which they've never seen before, never had access to before. It might also be a revenue opportunity for certain equipment suppliers because they're able to introduce new products which are enabled by this infrastructure that they haven't been able to offer before. And other folks are doing real tool improvements and process improvements as they go. From an internal perspective, this allows our engineers a pathway to view the tool console from any place they happen to be at the time, and also where it's available from the tools, they can view a tool light pole status, which tells you the different colors of the tool light pole, red, yellow, green, blue, the status at a glance, what the tool is doing. So it's provided us a way to have better and faster internal support as well for problem ID and resolution, as well as we find engineers are using it to do remote recipe creation. Instead of standing at the tool and running from tool to tool in the factory, they're able to do all this remotely from their desktop and load the data up into the tools. And we've also found that this has become very important for sharing high volumes of tool data across our engineering team, and in a safe manner with built-in virus protection within this solution. And then the collaboration value with working with our suppliers to improve these state-of-the-art processes. So what we see is increases in productivity and hence value of equipment in the factory. So I said we have to keep it up and running all the time. We can start out of the chute when we bring in a new piece of equipment. Our tool installation ramp time can be shortened if we have the eCenter solution up and running when people first try to start bringing the tool up. Reduces our mean time to repair. So you get the field engineers there quicker to see what's going on in the tool, and also in a proactive manner. If they have the data being collected remotely, they're doing real-time diagnostics on that data and are able to predict in some cases when equipment's going to need service or something might fail. And then also working on process and yield improvements at the same time. Cost reductions are being seen theoretically across the board. I'll say theoretically because the OEMs don't always share with us what their cost savings are by using the solution. And then relationship. We certainly continue to grow in our collaborative relationships with our suppliers, and this is helping across many of those areas. One other way I already mentioned, OEE. How do you improve that? Well, what we're simply doing is enabling better communication back and forth between the tool supplier and the factory, and trying to address these downtime parts of the bar here that eat away at your total tool availability time, and making the tool more available for manufacturing. So as I said earlier, that's really our #1 goal, and having a solution like this does help us to do just that. Got a few examples I'd like to take you through. This first one is where a tool is repaired without bringing the expert to the site. So the classic example you might think of, where you have a critical tool down situation like described in the video at the early part of the discussion. And the local maintenance and engineering staff may not be able to figure out root cause yet, and the subject matter expert they need from the OEM is located halfway around the world. And what we need to do is enable them to collaborate with that expert right away, get them to understand the problem, and give them remote access to that tool, or at least to that data, depending on the nature of the problem, so they can get in there and help diagnose and correct that problem. So a benefit may be 24 hours of downtime on that piece of equipment has been saved, and also the expense of bringing that expert over. Another example is where I was mentioning what some of the engineers are doing, where tools are monitored from the office and the home. This is where I was mentioning that recipe creation was one example where they can do that now remotely instead of running to tool. The others, if you looked at that map of the equipment, you'll see that some of those tools are spread pretty far apart in that factory, and that's a good few football fields of walking back and forth from one end of that factory to the other and up and down stairs. So just to get from one tool to the other can be addressed pretty easily with a solution like this, where an engineer can monitor what's going on in the tool wherever he happens to be with his laptop. So improves our response times, and higher asset utilization comes out of that, as well as visibility to real-time tool performance issues as they pop up. You see them quicker. Another example is remotely downloaded tool software. The tools typically need software upgrades as well as any of our laptops, in some cases more. There's some of these tools that get software updates about almost weekly from some of our friends over in Europe and one of the suppliers. And having people there physically downloading those software updates and patches all the time can be quite time consuming. So this solution can help by giving them the ability to do the downloads remotely with the right support team there on site as well as needed, but they're able to do the downloads and bring the tools back up much more quickly. Another example, this was one that hopefully I just avoided when I left New York today, was another winter storm coming through, and we've had quite a few of them this year. This was a few years ago, and it was a really bad one, and the factory was just up and running, and we sent everybody home, but had to queue up some critical lots that needed to get out the door. And plus we wanted to see what would happen. So we loaded the tools up with those critical lots, started in processing, sent as many people home as we could, and especially the engineering team, and let them log in from home through the eDiagnostic solution, go into their tools, and do the dispositioning they needed to do by looking at the tools and doing that remotely. And we were able to then complete those production runs and do that without the personnel there on site. Another example, improved collaboration on our joint development of processes. I mentioned how critical that is to our customers, both internal and external. And what this does is it gives us the ability to share this information we need, access to the tool data that we had trouble sharing before, and also just increases the collaboration. So we're able to do large data transfer, file sharing. Some of this is automated. This happens every morning at a certain time or every night at a certain time and sends data over to some of our suppliers. And they do their analyses in real time and then feedback results to us in real time. So I want to close with just a couple of slides on lessons learned over the past number of years since we put this in place. Number one, security, as I'd already mentioned, is such an ongoing challenge that it's not something you can ever put away. You never solve security, and that one's one that we're constantly dealing with, and rightfully so, because there are always new challenges of how people want to use the system, how the business is changing, but also the security threats that continue to grow out there as we continue to add remote access to our environments. Management education, understanding, and commitment must be maintained. We found that that was one of the things that helped us overcome some of the early obstacles as we started putting a solution like this in place. You can get various reactions from folks from, hey, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard, to, we're never going to allow you to give somebody remote access to anything in my factory. So you have both ends of that spectrum to deal with. And when you do finally move forward, you have to interlock across so many different areas and disciplines. It can be very, very difficult. And we found that really helped having the right executive champions leading that charge as we did that. And also making sure we had a clear understanding and published that of what the capabilities and expectations are of the system. So like you would with any project, you want to really make sure you tell people what they're going to get here, because they may come in with preconceived notions. And we also wanted to make sure this solution always stays aligned with our industry guidelines, our industry standards bodies going forward, because we believe that's very important. And then the final thing is we suggest defining a long-term plan. Make it a multi-year plan, and make sure you have interlock with your procurement teams and your equipment suppliers on what the expectations are for use. Make sure you have the management commitment for resources to support the project in an ongoing fashion. Remember, we said we want to be in control of who has access to the data. As you have personnel changes on a daily basis from all the folks across the business, including your suppliers, you have to manage that kind of thing. You want to stay on top of that. And just two things I want to point out there, because remember, this is not a network solution. This is not an IP address solution. This is really an application level controls solution. You're controlling who has access down to the data file. And finally, make sure you think about it from the other parts of the factory or enterprise perspective, how this will interface with your other factory applications, including your overall factory efficiency, equipment efficiency, APC controls, maintenance, et cetera. Thank you.